The Lakers, this is probably their worst season they have had probably ever. Maybe not ever. We've seen some bad ones. But what they mean by this might be one of the worst ever is because of who they had. They had LeBron James. They had Carmelo Anthony. They had Russell Westbrook. They had Anthony Davis. Injuries played a big part, and we fully understand it. I understand it. That is one thing I will say. If LeBron came out and said they had a ton of injuries, here's the thing with LeBron. Before we talk about what he said, if they ask LeBron about the season, if he came out and said, hey, you know what? We had all this talent. We had all this experience. We had all of this. But we did not perform the way we needed to. I did not perform the way we needed to. We did have injuries, but we have to find a way to overcome those injuries. Other guys do need to step up. I have to step up on leadership, and we have to find a way to get it done, even as Father Time is catching up with me. I would have 10 times more respect than what I do. And the respect I have for LeBron James is virtually zero. But I would have almost 10 times more respect for LeBron James if he came out and said that, because that's a true leader. We don't have that type of leadership in a lot of things in today. Those type of people that have that type of leadership are your great coaches, Jocko Willink, those type of people. That's who we have great leadership with. We don't see the type of leadership in our leaders, in politics, and everything else, and it transitions to sport as well. Asking LeBron James if this season was a failure. It's hard for players to say if it was a failure, but when you have that type of talent, you have that type of experience, if LeBron James is the king and the GOAT, which he's not, it's a failure. Michael Jordan would have said it's a failure. They asked him, Lakers season a failure? The title of this article, I love it. Lakers season wasn't a failure, ? LeBron James makes excuses instead of being a leader. I love it. In the Los Angeles Times. Habits of the past can resurface at unexpected times. As one particularly curious example did the Lakers practice facility Monday when it was broadcast around the world. And this is talking about the last game. LeBron James passed up a critical shot with the Lakers only a day removed from the end of another season. And looking ahead to an uncertain future, they desperately needed a leader. Instead, what they received was a more wishy-washiness from the passive-aggressive superstar who calls himself a king. The Lakers are lost, but James didn't provide them with any direction. They are a deflated franchise, but he didn't offer any words of inspiration. They are dysfunctional, but he didn't accept blame for his role in their failure in a way that could have started rebuilding a culture of accountability after their shameful scapegoating of Frank Vogel. Speaking just a couple hours before Vogel's firing made official, James wouldn't even acknowledge that a season in which the Lakers went 33-9 and missed the playoffs was a failure. It's not a failure at all, James said. We came to work every single day, put our hard hats on, and tried to get better every day, and the results just didn't happen for us, but it's not a failure. Asked how much responsibility he took for how the team season unfolded, he replied with a couple of lines of well-practiced lip service. Obviously, if you follow me in any of my career, when we don't succeed, I take a lot of the responsibility, he said. That's just who I am. I wish I could have been a lot better in leading this franchise this year. So basically, he said he was taking responsibility without specifically for what. Regardless how much blame he actually deserves, when the best player on a team holds himself to a high standard of accountability, it forces everyone else in the organization to do the same. That wasn't the case here. James could have talked about his body language, which often portrayed his lack of confidence and less talented teammates. He could have pointed out to his inconsistent defensive play, which was a team-wide problem. He could have acknowledged his shortcomings as a talented evaluator and recruiter, which contributed to an imbalanced roster that was too old. If anything, he continued to distance himself from the personal decisions that produced one of the most disastrous seasons in franchise history. Never mind that he hosted meetings with potential trade targets at his house. Ask me my opinion. I'm going to give my opinion, James said. But at the end of the day, they're going to make the decision that feels best for the franchise. Asked about Asked what he entered the season expecting of his ultimately unproductive partnership with Russell Westbrook that he helped broker, James replied, "I don't put any expectations on anything." The only direct apology he made was for playing in just 56 games, but the admission sounded as if it were designed to support his excuse about how the Lakers were ravaged by injuries. What made the lack of leadership problematic is that if James doesn't provide it, there's no one else in the organization who can. There's a reason the Lakers are in a disarray, and it starts up at the top with the owner, Jeannie Buss, who isn't the visionary her father was. And you also have a GM in Rob Pelinka. His qualifications run a basketball operations department of the sport's most decorative franchise. Suspicious about how he runs the program. So it still goes on and on. So LeBron James is very good at playing the narrative. And we've talked about this. LeBron James is very good at talking around the answer. Kind of, he starts to agree with what's said. So if they said you take responsibility, he kind of starts, but then he'll venture off to kind of take it away. He's like a politician talking about this. This article, the Los Angeles Times, where you play at, LeBron James, has written this article, and the title, I cannot be more excited of how the title is. LeBron James just doesn't ever take responsibility. Maybe when he first started on the NBA, he kind of did, but then it's turned into, well, he doesn't. He says he does, but he doesn't. And if you look at the trail of LeBron James, when he first started out, Cleveland Cavaliers were starting to come up. Then it kind of ends where you can't win. But then you go to Miami with the super team. Then you leave Miami in a disarray. You go to Cleveland, leave Cleveland again in a disarray. Wherever you go, besides Miami, head coaches get fired under LeBron James. You ever notice that? Body language is huge. And take it from me. Watching Kobe Bryant, RIP Kobe Bryant. The years where the Lakers had bad teams, they still made it to the playoffs. But even he talked about trying to be a leader, trying to figure that out, trying to figure out the best way to do it. He started to turn into Michael Jordan-esque when it came to leadership. But times he even says, body language is huge. And figured out, how can I get these guys to play better? LeBron strives himself on, leadership. But what kind of leadership do you provide? Remember the bubble where he brought the whole team in and started yelling at every single player from every different team to talk about political things and what they need to do and do this and do that. And a bunch of younger guys said, who the hell do you think you are to talk to me that way? Who the hell do you think you are to tell me what to do? The GOAT situation, that topic needs to finally die. I've said it finally needs to go a million times. This does. Because we talk about your team has a chance to get into the playing game and you didn't play in the final game. You make that April Fool's thing and you airball a shot. Those type of things take you out of the GOAT conversation. You guys ever seen the picture of Kobe Bryant wrapped up in a bunch of ice all over his body? He did that when his team didn't have a shot to get to the playoffs. The difference between Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant to LeBron James. Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant would die on that court to win a regular season game because they never knew when it was going to be done. They knew how much people, especially Kobe Bryant, knew how much they spent to be there, how much money gets spent to go watch an NBA game, to see him play. Tickets are expensive for all sporting events. Doesn't matter what it is. They knew how much money they spent. They would die on that court. LeBron is freakishly talented. LeBron can score. But excuses get made by LeBron. Kobe and Michael would take responsibility, even though in the back of their minds, they knew that the teammates did something wrong or something happened. They would take the responsibility and put it on their shoulders, especially Michael Jordan. I am a Kobe Bryant fan, maybe a bigger Kobe Bryant fan than a Michael Jordan fan, but I still put Michael Jordan the greatest of all time. I put it 1A and 1B with Kobe right there. There are things that Michael was better at than Kobe Bryant. So you have to put Michael Jordan up there. But they were the same player. In a world where we need leadership from the very top that's in Washington, from any type of coach, from the guy that's supposed to be the greatest of all time, you need constant leadership. You don't dance around the question. You take responsibility and talk about what to do to get better. Yes, LeBron, the season was a failure with what you had assembled, with what you've talked about on Twitter. Keep that same energy. Then you deleted it. LeBron, I think you need to go 0 dark 30 for the rest of your remaining life. Never again do we want to see a tweet by you, because ignorant comments from you outside of basketball, we're just over it. We're done. Yes, a lot of my opinions are not right. A lot of my thoughts are not right. But I'm not you, LeBron James. I don't have this big outreach like you do. One day that'd be awesome. But sometimes you need to think before you post something, LeBron, before you post it, because you're supposed to be this role model. Quit making excuses. Take responsibility, saying you guys didn't. Take responsibility. Quit making excuses. This season ultimately was a failure because we're not talking about Cleveland. We're not talking about some franchise that is never talked about to win a championship. This is the Los Angeles Lakers. Year in and year out, talk about to win a title. So when you accumulate who you are good, like LeBron James is a good basketball player, but when you have you who are the king and you bring in guys in because you help make those decisions. We all know it, even whether it says it or not. He is in there talking about it with them to get who is here, talk about who to hire as a coach now because Frank Vogel was the scapegoat for this. He was fired hours after the game and talked about even before it got leaked out. And I'm sure LeBron leaked it out because he's an ass. It's a failure. It's a failure. Kobe Bryant would call it a failure, and he's going to have a statue built of him for Los Angeles. You're never going to have a statue built for you, LeBron, at the Lakers, ever. That's why I hate when people put him in the Lakers and their top best players ever. LeBron, quit making excuses. The GOAT debate is now forever over. It's over. It is done. And I am glad we can bury it and be done. LeBron, just quit making excuses. LeBron, could you retire? Please. And thank you. But quit making excuses. Again, I'm going to read the title of this article because it's just great. It's absolutely phenomenal from the Los Angeles Times. Lakers season wasn't a failure, ? LeBron James makes excuses instead of being a leader. And that's where we're into that. LeBron is not a leader.